In my last video, I spoke about the curse of Jeconiah with regards to some of the rabbinic objections that were brought. Well, interestingly, when Michael Brown, in 2 debates that he did, brought the subject of Zerubbabel to the table, he brought up the subject, and David Blumofe and Tovia Singer both brought up the objection that Zerubbabel was not a king. And that is true. According to the context of Haggai 2, Zerubbabel was not a king. He was a ruler. So that I can agree with Tovia and David Blumofe on. But is the question of sitting on the throne the real issue? I contend that the issue is no. Now, let me clarify one thing. I'm not saying that sitting on the throne is not important. It is important, but I believe it's a secondary issue. But it is an important issue and vital one. But why am I saying it's a secondary issue? Because that's not the significant issue. In fact, I believe it's the signet ring that is the signet ring of Zerubbabel. That's the important issue, not as to whether he sat on the throne or not. Number one, in the New Testament, Mary and Joseph never sat on the throne. As first and foremost. You'll also note that in the New Testament, the Pharisees do not bring this objection to Jesus. So it's a reiteration of a point last time. The Pharisees do not even mention the Jeconiah argument. So there's no way they would bring the Zerubbabel argument, a rebuttal against it. Because the argument that David Blumofe and Tovia Singer presented was never presented by the Pharisees in the first place. But here's a thing to note. Even though Zerubbabel was not a king and Mary and Joseph were not a king, this is the second point. The Old Testament and even the Talmud, to the best of my knowledge, I need to recheck with regards to the Talmud, it doesn't explicitly say with regards to the signet ring that the throne has to be taken back immediately. Don't forget, Jeconiah never returned to rule in Jerusalem as a king, even though the Talmud does talk about his repentance and the fact that the curse was reversed as a result of his repentance. And I'm happy to provide references in the description if you ask me, or links in the comments page if you ask me. Point is, Jeconiah did not re-sit on the throne immediately, even though the curse was revoked. Okay? Let me reiterate that point again. Despite the fact that the Talmud talks about his curse being revoked because of his repentance, note that the Old Testament, he does not sit on the throne of Judah. In fact, in the very book of Jeremiah, he stays in Babylon until the day he dies. That's very important. So, I believe the issue is the signet ring. And the whole point about Michael Brown made about Zerubbabel was the messianic promise being renewed through Zerubbabel. And, of course, I already mentioned the objection that Tovia Singer brought up and David Blumofe brought up, so I needn't reiterate that point again. But the point is, the signet ring, I believe, is the main issue, not whether a descendant of David sits on the throne. Furthermore, I contend that the sitting on the throne is not immediate. It doesn't have to be. It can be a gradual step. Furthermore, if you were to believe in the New Testament, which I believe in, Jesus reclaims the throne. And think of the time gap between Jeremiah and Jesus. It's a huge gap between Jeconiah's repentance and the coming of Jesus. Huge gap. There was no taking back of the throne immediately. So who says that the criteria has to be that they've got to take the throne back immediately, even implicitly? The Old Testament does not even raise that objection. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think the Talmud raises that objection, although I have to recheck that for myself. And not even the New Testament raises the objection either that Tovia or David bring up. So to me, again, as I say before, the main issue is not the reclaiming of the throne. The main issue is the messianic promise being renewed, which I believe the signet ring in Haggai 2 is a symbol of. It's a symbol of the messianic promise being renewed. That's the point of Haggai 2. It's the renewal of the messianic promise, not whether or not a messianic king can sit on the throne. That's that issue's put aside. It's an important issue, and yes, a king should sit on the throne. But that's not the point of Haggai 2. The point is the renewal of the messianic promise. As I've said before, I'm happy to quote the verse in the description, Jeconiah's curse, although it was reversed, again as I say, he did not return to Jerusalem to rule as king. And Zerubbabel was a governor, not a king. Mary and Joseph were peasants. They were not, Joseph was a carpenter. He was not a king. So, it's not whether or not a king can sit on the throne immediately. It's whether or not this messianic promise has been renewed. That's the main issue, I believe. So to me, the whole thing about Zerubbabel, which Tovia brings to the table, personally, I think it is a non-objection on his part and the part of David Blumofe. And I wouldn't mind Tovia Singer making a response to this video in an article or whatever. I wouldn't mind seeing what he has to say about what I've said. That would be very, very interesting. Now, I'm not saying a Jew or a Christian has to agree with me on this. I am a Christian, but I recognize that not all Christians will agree with me on what I've just said. But it's worth checking out what I say. I mean, be a Berean, Acts 17:11. Anyway, hope this video was of interest to you. Thanks for watching. And if there are any Jews watching this, well, I wouldn't mind your response in the comments below. Or even a video response. I'd welcome it. Thanks for watching.